Dudes and dudettes, welcome back to The Anxious Truth. This is episode number 138. It is January of 2021, the first podcast episode in a new year. 2021 means that I will have been doing this podcast for 7 years, which blows me away when I think about it. Today we are talking about what I think is a super interesting topic, gender issues in mental health and anxiety disorders and recovery. I had the conversation with our friend, Dr. Bridget Cooper, Dr. B. You have seen Dr. B in the podcast before. We talked about the differences between men and women, how we experience these mental health issues like anxiety disorders, how we talk about it differently, how we approach recovery and solving the problem differently. It was really good. So we'll get rolling on that in a second. But before we do, you guys know what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you about my book, The Anxious Truth, a step-by-step guide to understanding and overcoming panic, anxiety, and agoraphobia. It is on my website at theanxioustruth.com/recovery guide. I set out to write what I think would be a very useful recovery tool for people with anxiety disorders. And oh my God, I did that. The messages I get on the daily are amazing. It's helping a ton of people. I'm really proud of that. So if you're looking for more help than you're going to get just in these podcast episodes or my social media content, by all means, go check out the book, theanxioustruth.com/recovery guide. If you've already got the book, you're digging it, you're using it, you're loving it, maybe write me a review on Amazon. Every little bit helps, and I would appreciate that. All right, let's get cooking with Dr. B. We're talking gender issues in mental health and anxiety disorder recovery. I think you guys are going to like it. I will come back after the interview to wrap things up. See you in a bit. Dudes and dudettes, I have no idea what episode number this is of the podcast because we're making this up as we go, and we'll release it whenever we release it. But joining me, the fabulous Dr. B, Bridget Cooper, all the way from the hottest room in her house.
The hottest room in my house, which is fairly warm today, but not nearly as warm as the first time we were on camera when, honest to God, I thought I was having like a hot flash and heat stroke like all at the same time.
Anyway, today we're going to spend a little time. We're going to talk about something I think near and dear to both of our hearts, or at least in the forefront of our brains. And that is gender and gender biases and gender roles in recovery, be it trauma recovery, anxiety recovery, whatever it is, dealing with mental health issues and gender issues that come along with that. And how did we get into this discussion? I can't remember what started it.
Oh my God, some random riff we had offline, and
no, we never do that.
Never. And I think we talked about how we were talking about men and women and how we deal differently with challenge and emotions and some of our go-to emotions and what that shows up like when we're trying to tackle something that is challenging to us in a mental health realm.
Yeah, especially in the mental health realm, where my contention has been, and this is just something that sort of dawned on me. I have a lot of stuff I can throw at you. You're going to run with all this shit, I can tell.
Go for it.
So I think in the mental health realm online, in this self-help space that we're kind of both occupying, like you guys, meaning women, the female of the species, you are so much better, I think, at being open and honest and talking about these things without shame necessarily, without embarrassment. Like women are just better at it.
I think it's different, but keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why that. I think we have theories as to why that is, but you just seem to be more willing to talk about those sort of things, more, and dare I say, feminine type things. Yeah. Those, be kindness and compassion and self-care, and it's
vulnerability.
It's really, vulnerability, right? Like you're rarely going to hear a dude talk about like, yeah, I just really need I need a me day, man. Like I just need a me day. Like my friends have never said that to me. I don't know why, we might have our own version of me day, but it's still a me day.
You do. And so here's the thing. So it's different linguistically, but it tends to be similar needs. Like we all have the same core needs. We just end up articulating them and seeking to have them fulfilled in different ways. Mm. So I think there is a difference in how men and women communicate. For one, they've done studies on it that women, and, just ask my ex-husband how many words it took me to get to a point. And you would find that we have many more words in our descriptions than men do. So if you ask a man to describe something, he will go right to the tree, right? Yeah. Whereas a woman will talk about the branches and the leaves and right? There's not one way that's better or worse depending on the situation. No. But because we've been socialized to have that kind of conversation, we've also been socialized. Like I've seen this advice out there that if you want a man to talk about something, you don't sit across from him and ask him questions. You do things with him. right? So you sit side by side and work on a car, or, work in the garden, or, like do something, but sitting next to, because it's less confrontational. Whereas women were just like face on, talking to each other, very touch oriented, all of that. So I
Yeah.
think it starts at a really young age. Some of it I think is probably in our DNA. Some of it is very, nature versus nurture, but we come at this differently. So women feel more confident in having in-depth, deep conversations because we've been having them with our girlfriends all along.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back before social media, we just sat and had sleepovers and talked until 3 o'clock in the morning, where young men wouldn't have had those opportunities to have that kind of in-depth conversation unless they grew up with sisters or they had female friends or cousins, right?
Right.
Then they start they're using a few more words to describe things. So I think that's at the core of it.
I would agree. And I think we in those formative years, we're spending as much time with our friends and our peers as you guys are. Just we're doing completely different things.
Completely different.
Generally speaking.
Yeah, generally speaking. We're talking in all generalities before anybody jumps on us in the comment section about the fact that, some women, some men, sure. And I think that, and this isn't because, I don't think we're describing this, I don't know about you, but I think we're not describing this because it's the right way. It simply has been the way. And I think in future generations, even the generation of our kids, it's starting to shift more. There's starting to be a lot, some, like, even to the point of, like, notoriously car insurance. When I went to get my daughter on my car insurance, I thought, oh my gosh, I've hit the jackpot because I've got 2 daughters.
Not so much,
it's going to be so much cheaper. And I'm told that because young women are now not only more thrill seeking, but also texting and driving and selfieing and driving more, that their rates are right on par with young men's. I'm like, I thought I was getting like this coup. So there are shifts, but historically speaking and genetically speaking, there are some real differences about how we kind of come onto this this forum and what we think is okay to discuss and to be, because we've had just more practice at it.
Yeah. And I think what's so interesting when I see men and women described, like, in my particular subject area, people are dealing with anxiety disorders.
Yeah.
The way men and women will describe it, again, generally speaking, there are, of course, exceptions, and there's an individual case, of course, but women are much more likely, and maybe that's that more words thing that you were just talking about, to take into account the whole thing. So my family, my kids are on my nerves, my husband is on my nerves, we're having money, whatever it is that's contributing and adding difficulties in their recovery. They are willing to, now they're feeling as badly as everybody else. So everybody's on this equal footing in terms of the suffering that they're enduring. But in the end, a man will go straight for, I am failing. I'm an abject, unabashed failure. Whereas a woman might feel like she's failing too, but she's willing to incorporate all the factors that go into that. And a guy is just not going to talk about that. He is going to take that on as he's internalizing it. I am a failure. I am failing everything. I'm failing my family. I'm not a good role model. I'm not living up to the expectations. No acknowledgement of the situation at all. Like, dude, you're dealing with like an anxiety disorder here. This is going to happen. We're working on it. No, not allowed.
I want to jump into 2 things that I heard in that. Okay, so one is that absolutely the words and the practice and all of that, I think that's a huge part of why women have been analyzing things. Like when we get together, just FYI, if you were wondering what we do in the bathroom, we're picking things apart, right? We're talking, we're analyzing, we're looking at relationship dynamics, we're seeing systemic influences, right? We're like, whether it's watching the dramas that we are attracted to or whatever it is, like we have been picking shit apart for years. So looking at our own lives in that way, we're able to pick shit apart, right? So I think we just have that natural skill. But I want to hit at something else about men, and what I find so interesting is that when you talk about those 2 descriptions of a similar experience, women we have a need for control. We all have a need for control. And women are expressing their need for control by being able to control the description and the narrative and the understanding.
Okay.
Men, if you listen to what they're saying, by owning it all themselves and saying, I am a failure. This is it. It's me. I'm broken. Like I'm in this trouble spot. In effect, they're satisfying their own need for control by owning it all themselves and not depending on any of the other factors and the nuance and the system influences that may or may not be at their disposal to change.
Right.
So in a sense, it's just a different focal point for how we understand what we're in control of and what we're not. And I think women are more comfortable being interdependent. And again, I think this is DNA and culturally driven,
right,
because we have come to rely on systems in a very different way.
I think that's interesting because, this is a thing that you'll find in like the man space, if you will, especially now that anybody that can
they don't
fog
let
up a
me in
mirror.
there, so
No,
I don't know.
No.
They don't let me in.
They asked. I said, yeah, she's a little sketchy. Let's wait and see what happens.
Thanks.
But yeah, so I think in this sort of man space that is now really blossoming, especially now that, like I said, anybody with a mirror that can fog up a mirror can have a platform. And I'm amazed at the little cottage industry that has popped up around men's issues and men that have decided they will teach other men how to be men. And one of the common themes is own your shit. Be responsible. Own your shit. No one will own your shit but you. There is, to a certain extent, a oversimplification and a toxicity in that, which is what we're talking about. Like you cannot own all the shit. Like some of it is not ours to own, yet it is held up as a sort of masculine ideal to ownership.
Right.
Ownership.
To be in charge.
Yes. And ownership. We take responsibility for our own stuff. We take responsibility for our outcomes, and we take ownership of the situation. They even held it up. You get like ex-Navy SEALs who talk about this, like ownership of the objective is key in training. And like, okay, I get that, but you cannot apply it to every corner of the universe. Like we can't own everything. So we get these crazy messages that really lead you right into the funnel of like, yeah, you're a failure.
Right.
You're a failure, and you better own it because it's all on you, dude.
Yeah, it's all yours.
It's all on you. So you did it. You made this.
When I worked in addiction recovery, and we were doing a research project at the time, and what we found in the research was that we would ask these 3 statements of the people who were in recovery, and depending on their answer, we could predict who would have a better outcome in recovery. So they were true, false statements. I'm going to say them to you because I think they're really apropos to what you're talking about.
Let's do it.
So the first is, I'm completely responsible for my addiction. The second is, others have contributed to my addiction. The third is both A and B.
Yeah, it would have to be both A and B.
Yeah, but I'm telling you that so many addicts answered true on one or true on the second, not so often true on both.
Really? So it's black and white. It either is all
correct.
Me,
it's either all me
or it's somebody else.
Other people. It's other people's stuff, right? But if they could see that they were solely responsible at the end of the day because they're the only one in their skin,
right?
But that other people contribute, then they would see the train coming down the track. And they'd be able to get off the track, right? To reroute their own train. But if they don't see the train running on the track, then they're not going to be able to avoid disaster. So I think that's like a really good insight for men to be able to own that part of, if they want to take the message, owning their shit, go right ahead.
Yeah.
But owning their shit is also about owning an understanding of when it isn't theirs.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
right.
true.
Of being able to own the contribution that other people play at hurting them. And I think I've seen this up close and personal with men who will be like, no, I got this. No, I got this. Do you though? Like you do, but there's only so much you can carry. Like there's only so much, and doesn't make you less of a man. It makes you actually more of a man, woman, person to be able to say, I can't do this all by myself because that's not how I was built.
Yeah.
Like that's actually stronger than the alternative. And
Yeah, at a minimum, I can't do this all now. Even if you're unwilling to say, well, no, I still want to do it all. but I
Right.
can't do it all now. I'm going to have to prioritize some stuff, which is
Right.
another thing that we're sort of like is held up as an ideal
Yeah.
prioritization and planning and delegation and all that stuff. Yet we're going to have a across the board almost refusal to acknowledge that that's a thing. Oh, no. I got to fix this all right now.
All
It's
right
all on
now.
me. I'm a
Yeah,
failure. Like,
absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to wave a magic wand and sprinkle some, pixie
yeah,
dust, and then all of a sudden everything's going to be better. And without a recognition of how
uh-oh.
we got to the point we got to, and that's a cost of not looking back at the trail of all the influences and all the contributions to how we got here,
Yeah.
and being able to reconcile those things is tough.
I find it
Absolutely
also
tough. So the
amazing.
other, I remember the,
No, go ahead. No, finish. I want to hear
yeah.
the thought. Yeah.
No, I want to hear
Okay.
it's amazing.
So what I find amazing is that thing where a dude often wants to, well, I'm a failure. He's going to take responsibility for all of that,
Right.
which in many instances, in the case of dealing with these disorders that I'm talking about, that could be a good thing, because the realization that it is inside you. You do have the power to change that. But
Right.
that part where I have to say, well, you're going to have to own some bad brain habits that you've developed here, and you're going to have to face those things and do scary things. Well, then suddenly that part they don't want to own, which
Why do
blows
you
me
think that
away.
is?
Well, I
Why
think,
do you,
look, I don't think that's a man or woman thing, to be honest with you. People don't want to do scary, hard things.
right.
We're just not wired for that. We're wired for the path of least resistance as human beings, unless under extreme
Yes.
duress. And, I think it's sort of interesting because like the verbal recognition of I got this, I own my shit,
Right.
doesn't necessarily translate into the practicality of, okay, then let's confront the lessons you keep teaching yourself when you run from anxiety, when you hide, when you avoid.
Right. But it's because I think, and because I've read your stuff and I've listened to a number of your podcasts, that you're talking about facing a certain failure, meaning an experience of failure, not actually failing in the long run, but feeling like shit trying to do something, like feeling like,
Yeah.
but I'm having all these feelings. I don't want to have all these feelings. I was doing all these things to not have all these feelings, and now I have all these feelings, which feels to people, and you said this,
Yes.
feels to people like failure.
Just
So you're
experiencing fear is failure for a lot of guys.
right.
A lot of humans, not just guys.
A lot of humans, but
Yeah.
especially men, because
Yeah.
it pulls away what they perceive as where their power is to not feel it or to walk through it without experiencing it, right?
Yeah.
And so if that's the measure of success, then you're asking them to fail, right? Like I think that's the
Yeah.
head game.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's not actually what you're asking them to do. You're asking them to succeed in a different way than they're used to succeeding.
Right.
And
Right.
that in and of itself, from the messages that we get, societally and, in our dyads and, families, is to not fail. And I think women have a different experience of failure, because that's not, I don't think it's been our construct as much that failure is described in that way. Like, I think we feel failure, but we usually feel failure in our inability to help others.
Yeah.
That's often where it shows up, is that if someone is hurt because of something we did or didn't do,
Right.
that feels more failure than if we don't do something perfectly.
It does
right?
make sense.
Like, yeah,
it does actually
just,
make sense.
yeah,
I also find for a man, a lot of times, just the fact that they experience doubt, uncertainty, failure, fear feels like like I shouldn't be afraid. So that's failure to them. For a woman, what I find is they're willing to accept that you have to feel things.
yes,
Just feel like they can't handle it. So I may be, look, all I'm doing is crowdsourcing this based on many, many people that the patterns emerge when you talk to a lot of people like I do. So men they just don't think they should feel it ever. Like, that's not permissible. Women know that they have to, but they just feel like, well, I have to, and I'm not going to be able to handle it when I do. So they don't give themselves much of a chance to succeed in that context. And for a man, it's like, well, the minute I feel afraid, I'm clearly a failure here. So there's so many differences in that I find fascinating. It is a nuance.
That is a nuance, because because both are talking about failure, both are talking about feelings, but differently. And I think that part of that, for women anyway, on our side, so I represent all the women behind me, that if you feel all the big feelings, because you have been in that space, like you have like lived in that space, that they can feel so big.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they can feel so much. And we aren't trained to come off with bravado and overconfidence in ways that men are, right? Like my aunt taught me to fake it till I make it, but I that's not how I was raised, right?
Right.
That's not
unusual.
what, yeah, right.
Yeah.
But that's much more usual for like chin up, buck up, you know, pretend or whatever on a male side. So they're much more comfortable, at least pretending that they got this, whereas women are not. So because a lot of the pushback I've ever gotten, I mean, because you see my message, I'm kind of, you know, I mean, I've put my picture out there with a whip, right? So I come off with all this, like, you know, confidence and certainty, which I have over the years accumulated. But to see a woman in that space and in that with that message can be really off-putting to people in general and men in particular, because that's not how we typically show up, right? Is being badass. You know, that seems like off. So I think women are just more comfortable also articulating their fear linked to that sense of it being too much and failing.
Yeah, women are also most likely, and I did a little poll. Look, it's an Instagram poll. It's nothing scientific at all.
Oh, that's super scientific.
It's ultra scientific. Absolutely. We can make huge decisions based on this. And I had asked at one point, because it was sort of a theme for the week, the lesson for the week was dealing with emotions, like emotions are not failure. You know, so do you think that all of these emotions that you struggle with make you, or do you think they make you too much for other people? Like this just ruins my relationships. Men don't answer it. Women overwhelmingly answer, oh yeah, absolutely. So I guess there's that acknowledgement that I'm part of a system and I am infecting other people, whereas a dude doesn't even want to, like, hey, you know, my shit ain't your problem, so we're not even gonna, that's not even a question. But for a woman, not only is it a question, it's a big resounding, yes, I ruin everything when I'm afraid and unsure. I'm like, what?
But here's the thing. So
terrible.
And that comes from relationship experience, right? So at least, and I'm in a heteronormative, you know, mindset here.
Yeah.
So, you know, forgive me for that. But from a heteronormative perspective, like women and men, when they get in relationships, and I can vouch for this, if I display emotion, I become too much. Like I'm hysterical or I'm, you know, whatever. Like there's all these pieces that are problematic, right? So I think that is a message that we get as women, that we're too much. So we have to tone it down. Like I can't tell you how many women I've coached and been friends with who have cried at work. And that is like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And what we find is that, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Sorry, went off for a second. Gotta love being on a phone. What we have is that it's not fear or sadness that we're usually crying about. It's anger. And women have a harder time showing anger than they do fear and sadness. Right? Like that was one of the things I think we discussed on offline, is that fear and sadness seem much more comfortable for women to express and display. Whereas anger, we haven't necessarily been approved for that emotion. Like that's not one of our things. So on the other side, men have been cultured not to show fear and sadness, but anger's okay.
Oh, that seems so plainly obvious, because, you know, a guy that may be able to express things like sadness or disappointment, you know, they really, it is viewed as more a feminine thing, a more sensitive thing. Oh, he's getting in touch with his feminine side. We even have words for it. And if a woman decides that she can openly display anger, then, you know, you're being a little bit butch and aggressive and you're a bitch. And so, we even have words for it. It's not cool. It's not cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not cool at all.
Yeah,
totally not cool.
Not cool at all. So, I got two other things I want to throw at you here. I'm digging your feedback here. So, in, say, my Facebook group, for instance, it's a large group, and at least there, it's mixed. It's probably, I never did a survey, but it's probably close to 50-50 in terms of gender.
Right.
That's cool. On Instagram, that was pretty slick. We didn't see you do that. So
Right.
whatever that
Exactly.
was.
Yeah. We'll find out.
But so maybe 50-50. And other places, my audience skews heavily female. But at any rate, in the Facebook group, what I find interesting is that when a man finds a place that he now sees is safe, or where it is permissible for him to talk about these issues,
Right.
he is more likely to want to just continue to talk about them for a longer time before actually starting to take action. So my experience over a large number of people and an extended period of time is that women start to recover from these disorders that I'm dealing with faster than the men, because they are quicker to move into action, and the men want to talk about it for longer. And
interesting.
Yes, and it was brought to me actually by Joe Ryan, right?
Yeah.
And he,
which we still have to introduce.
We still like we all have to get together. But he was the one that said, that's because you've given them a space where it's permissible. Like it's yours, so it's actually a guy's space. You made it, and you're giving them permission to. You're not hammering them and doing the whole trash talking alpha male nonsense if they talk about being down.
Right.
So they never get a chance to do that in any part of life. So can you just give me another 3 weeks to just talk about this, because I don't get to, which I thought was fascinating. Oh my God. Yes. Come on. Don't make me do things. I just want to talk about it. Yes, I'm allowed to talk about it. Nobody's going to call me the P word and kick me out of the room, so.
Exactly. Yeah. They're like that woman or guy at the bar who no one talks to at home, and you start, feeding them drinks, and you're going to have the best friend by the end of the night, because they're not going to be able to stop.
They don't get to do it in other places. So you give, if you give a guy a safe space, or a place where he's not prone to that judgment or ridicule or bullying over being a little bit more vulnerable.
Right.
And they're going to take it.
Yeah. And he's not, and I think that's the other thing about relationship dynamics, is that we superimpose, sometimes they are inaccurate, relationship expectations, where we think that the other people are expecting us to be a certain way. So we don't want to step out of that role. So we're a provider, or we're nurturer, or whatever those roles are that we think we're fulfilling. So the moment we think we have to step out of that to be able to express our true humanity, our vulnerability, our anger, or whatever that is, we don't know what to do with that, because we don't know how to step outside of role. So if they can find another place where they can be in a different, they can express that without having to worry about bumping up against role and, violating contracts and that sort of thing with their loved ones. They're like, okay, here it is. Right. And what you hope is that in that experience with you and in the group, that they're able to take that and translate that back to where they can express those things more authentically and vulnerably in those relationships where they actually count. Because as much as I know you care, you're still not forming, close interpersonal relationships with everybody, right?
We don't get to meet each other. Right. We're not family. We're not exactly,
Correct.
So I would agree with you 100% on that. And I just found it to be such a fascinating thing. After a while, it was like, man, the women are just tougher. And I will admit, so sometimes my own gender bias comes into play. I'll speak to the men maybe a little bit differently than I speak to the women. And I had to catch myself. Like, wait, why am I doing that? I don't understand why I'm doing that. But
I think, and I think
part of socialization. It's in the culture. It's
right. And you own that. So it's not like you're oblivious to the fact that you're doing it. And so I think if you call that out and say, if you want to call me back out, if you want me to by
all means, let me know. Because I don't know why I'm doing this. It just seems like it's normal to do this. So there's that. And there's also the issue of patience. I had to catch myself and say, whoa, why am I not feeling as patient with the men as I am with the women? I will own that too.
Right. Because you've probably been socialized in your male to male relationships to be like, suck it up, let's go.
Probably.
And so I'm going to do something, and you may hate me for this. This may be the last time we're ever on a podcast together. So I'm going to be really sad if that's true. But, so I watched I'm in your classroom.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And, I watched your response to women's tears. And
go ahead. I want to see it. I want to, yeah.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to ask you what is your, if you're aware of it.
Yeah.
When you see women crying, what do you feel like is your knee-jerk gut move,
I-
like instant reaction.
I could absolutely answer that without even questioning it. I want to stand between them and whatever is making those tears.
Yes.
I can't. I understand that I can't, but that is the
Right.
instinctual reaction. I want to get in front of whatever that is. I clearly
Right.
can't.
Right.
Yeah,
But you try.
but
So because I
yes.
watched you on film and I was like, oh, and we're having this gender conversation. This is going to be so
Yeah,
much fun.
no, it's
Because
actually
I
cool
saw,
though.
and you like, because you are so articulate in and in the self-help arena and figuring out how to like get in touch with emotions and all this other stuff. And I watched it and you tensed and I almost saw you like wanting to jump through the phone. And I was like, what is going on over there? And
Yeah.
I think that's, but it's so telling because I think that I think there are two stereotypical responses to women's tears by men.
Mm-hmm.
One is yours,
Right.
and two is the run.
Yeah, I can't imagine the
right.
run.
Like the run, and it doesn't necessarily mean a run physically.
No, I
right?
understand.
It's a
Yeah.
run of like, okay, stop.
Yeah.
Like,
It's okay to cry, but no, it's really not.
don't do it.
Don't do that.
Right? Like that. Remember in Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and the
Yes.
officer is like, get back in there, too. Get back in there, right? It's like that, So I think like, and I called you out only to give
I don't mind at all.
like
It's a good conversation.
opportunity for men to own that experience, and
Yeah.
for women, and this is my shout out to women and my like clap back to women, that if you notice a man either pushing you off of feeling a feeling
Mm-hmm.
or trying to step in front of it, it's not about getting angry about it or offended or all that nonsense, because that's a waste of energy, but to simply own the fact that it's okay to feel that emotion and to simply feel it and
Yeah.
let them know, I'm okay. Like, I'm okay. I'm going to need to be with this for a minute. I'm going to get better. I'm going to get beyond this. This isn't forever. This isn't permanent, but I can do this. Like, I can hold this emotion, and let the discomfort be where the discomfort needs to be, which is honestly in that moment, that would have been to you, right? You were going to need to deal with your own discomfort about watching something that you couldn't fix, right?
Yes.
That you couldn't step in front of and all of that. And I think that when we're in this kind of self-help, improvement space, we need to be conscientious about what we own of other people's,
Mm-hmm.
because you can suffocate or smother,
Yeah.
right, yourself or other people if you aren't clear about kind of how you tend to express emotion and how you tend to be when other people express emotion.
What I find,
yeah.
What I find interesting about that, and I don't mind this conversation at all. I don't feel like it's a call out at all. It's interesting that
he's just saying that on film, everybody, but he's never going to have me on again.
That's not true. You know that. But what I find interesting is that how many times do you hear me tell people you're going to have to experience your stuff? This is part of the process. And yet when it's in my face, admittedly, that instinctual reaction is you got to get in front of that. That's not, you can't, that's not okay. This person needs help.
It's incongruent, but it's totally what we have to own, right?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I think that getting comfortable with discomfort, and I write about it in Pain Rebel, but getting comfortable with discomfort is our job. Like, and you're instructing people to do it.
Yeah.
So we all have to model that, right? Like, we're all kind of showing up in each other's lives to be able to model these things for each other so that we can all grow and change and evolve. And that's part of it, is being able to look at discomfort and say, you don't own me. You don't rule me.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it to the other side of this. I'm going to be okay.
Yeah, that's true. So it's at least being aware of it means that you can start to make adjustments. So no, it's a good conversation. In fact, we could pull back the curtain a little bit. After I read Little Landslides, I think the very next day, you and I had a very brief exchange, and I actually put that right at you. Like, how am I supposed to talk about this with you? Because all I want to do is get in front of all that shit that was coming your way.
Right.
And I know that I'm not supposed to. Like, what should I do with that? I actually had to ask you. How am I supposed to talk about this with you?
And it was funny because I am always so curious about how people respond and react to Little Landslides, because it is such a a powerful, I think, I mean, not like speaking to my own, but just the story itself,
No,
right?
no, it's hard to read.
Yeah. And it's because I write it from the first person. So there's like, you're hearing the trauma through my eyes as a child and trying to make sense of the nonsensical. And I have found that so often that people wanted to protect me. And I said, that's actually, and you and I, the conversation we had was that it's a totally understandable and compassionate and beautiful response to have to that information. And at the same time, it was needed then and it's not needed now.
Right. Right.
And that was actually the call. That was like part of the messaging that I was trying to articulate, is that we have to look out for those who cannot look out for themselves. But those who can look out for themselves, we need to simply be there for them when they need us. Not to get in front of that, not to step in the way, not to try to protect and defend unless they ask us for it, right? But those who can't protect and defend themselves, we can't wait for them to ask.
Yeah, and you have to be able to see the difference. You really do, because there's a difference. There really is.
There is, and part of that is about communication, which is about using those words, that whether we use a few or we use a ton, is to say, do you need me? And like you did, you were like, how do you, like, would it be okay? Is that offensive if I like say, like, I want to, whatever. I mean, you didn't say it, but like, smack some heads, like whatever. So, but yeah, I think it's about asking, how can I show up for you right now? And I actually had that exchange with a girlfriend of mine the other day when she was struggling, with this COVID thing. I said, how can I show up for you today?
Yeah. And
she might be like, I got this. Or she might be like, I need an air hug. Or she might be, can you go, I don't know, like throw darts at a picture of somebody, whatever. But like, ask me what I need from you. And I think that's the first way we find out what that difference is.
Your answer and obviously was so good though. Like, you were very clear, and clearly you've had time to work all that out, clearly. Right. But yes, you were able to very clearly say, well, thank you. I appreciate that. But right now I'm good. It's all good. Right. So it just makes it much easier now for me as your friend to know exactly what it is that you are looking for. Okay. Correct. That's cool. Like, whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah, I'm good with that. Yeah. So, very good. Very, very good. Let's talk about one more thing, and I think you're going to have.
Okay, I can't wait.
I think we talked about this offline at one point, maybe after one of our last episodes that we did.
Yeah, when we cut them off and then we keep going, you mean?
Right. Yeah. And we just keep going. Exactly. So an hour later, we're still on the phone. So I started this by saying, I feel like women are so much better equipped, better at discussing these issues, almost dominating the self-help space online in a way.
Except for you.
Okay. So, but this is what I want to bring up, right?
Yeah.
So if I look at all the people online that I've networked with, people like you that I've met and learned from, and we collaborate together, the vast majority of them are women. And you guys are just so good at talking about this stuff. And guys aren't necessarily out there doing it in the numbers that you are, because the royal we kind of suck at it. We've talked about that in the beginning of this.
Right.
So here is Dr. B with literally a PhD from a prestigious American university. And all of the women that I'm, have the privilege of collaborating with tend to be credentialed. They've done their homework. I respect that. I admire it. I love to learn from them. They're amazing. I'm just some dude with a degree in architecture that owns technology companies. And I did not give a second thought to firing up microphones and start talking about anxiety disorders. Now,
right.
I'm not ashamed to say I'm proud of the fact that my knowledge in this has grown over time, and I am dedicated to this, right?
Absolutely.
However, when I decided I'm going to just start helping people with this, what qualifications did I have? And I do not see women exhibiting that same level of like, I got shit to say, I'm just going to turn on a mic and say it. So is that
okay.
This might not have anything to do with recovery, but I think we should talk about it anyway. Because how come I felt like, sure, I'll talk, and maybe no one will listen to me, I would have been okay with that. If I was talking, all right, no big deal, I didn't care anyway. But why am I more likely to do that? And a few other dudes that are doing it, there aren't too many of us, but you guys who are all doing such a great job of this went through. I don't see women without their credentials out there sharing this experience.
Right. So I think there's a couple of things. One is risk aversity, right? That we are risk averse. Like, we don't, as women, we are not as likely to go do daredevil, sometimes stupid things out there. Not calling your podcast stupid.
Oh no,
not,
I do a lot
I'm
of
more
stupid
thinking
stuff
like,
on the
I'm
daily.
more thinking of like a friend of mine who said, when my son called me from the emergency room, he said, well, Dad, it started when I was standing on the basketball, right? Like,
That's just what we do.
That's what you do, right? And my younger daughter does that. My younger daughter, I have pictures of her standing on a soccer ball on the sidelines. I'm like, seriously? Like, what are you doing? Anyway, so I think in general, women tend to be more risk averse. So because of that, we're less likely to put ourselves out there in big, vocal, observable ways in that way, and to take risks about that. The second thing, and it comes from that first thing, I think a little, they've actually done studies. So when you ask a woman who, say there's a position open in your company, we're talking about corporate America before we went live, and there's a position open, and I'm a woman and I'm in that company and I have 90% of the credentials, I may not apply.
Because you don't have all of
them. Because I don't have all of them. Why? They're not going to be interested in me. I need to have at least all of them, if not more.
Yeah.
Whereas a man, if he has going on 60 to 65% of the qualifications, he's like, what the fuck? I'm going for it.
I'm in. Right. What's the worst I can say? No.
Right. I got this.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's some of the way that we've been cultured to take up less space in rooms, to not be out in front of things, to not be too loud, to not be too, like, you look at it today, by the way, we're recording this on the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment.
That's right. It is.
It's been 100 years since we were disenfranchised. Like, we could not vote. We were not a human being in a citizen in the eyes of our own government until 100 years ago. So it's going to take some time for women to get, I think, fully and wholly into the spaces that they rightfully own. Yeah. To be able to say, like, I've got something good to say, I'm gonna go say it. And what the hell? Let's make this happen. Right. Instead of having to get out of the way of a very patriarchal, misogynist, like whatever society that we've been in. Yeah. And again, that's on a macro level, not on a micro level, that there are amazing men and shitty women, but on the whole, we've been relegated to positions not of power. Yeah. Yeah. And I think to bring it back, to the whole recovery thing, I kind of see a little bit of that. There are echoes in that in recovery for sure. Yeah. Whereas women feel a little bit more, they're more worried about doing it wrong. They're more worried about making mistakes. They're more worried about learning every last nuance of every word that I put in a book before they start to do something. And to try and impart that, like, no, just do it. Just start doing it. You'll make mistakes. It's okay. You'll pick yourself up, keep going. But I find it fascinating that there's really no rhyme or reason to why somebody like me should have thought I had anything to add to this conversation. But I never thought that I didn't. But time out. You did absolutely have something to add, because we all learn through story and personal experience and connection. So when we can see ourselves in the eyes of someone else, we absolutely have a duty to be able to go out there and put ourselves out there in ways that help other people heal. So you you found that calling. So I think the degree thing aside, the degrees have a certain thing to them, but I think it's about the passion and compassion that people bring to the table to be able to do that. But it does speak to that confidence piece. And I hope that the women and men who are listening to this are seeing themselves in parts of this enough to be able to say, for men, I'm going to take more risks to be able to, not the risks that I'm used to taking, but the risks that I'm not used to taking, because I'm designed to take risks, right? And the women who are built on compassion and support and insight, to be able to know that they have all the resources available to be able to make it through those risky, dangerous feeling places in their own right. Right. So both genders and all the genders in between, right? Like the whole spectrum has the ability to be able to move through this recovery process in a powerful, passionate, compassionate way. And we just have to be attentive to what our inborn and, cultured, responses might be to some of these challenges.
Yeah. And I think in the end, it would be kind of nice if we could all do that. So to me, we have this giant human resource pool. Like, I want as many capable, confident, talented, smart, everybody has something to contribute. I would love it if everybody did. And I think we should all, kind of want that in a way. So
Absolutely.
yeah, like, take a chance, do something today that maybe you didn't think you could do, regardless of what that might be.
I mean, what the hell, right?
Yeah.
What the
Got
hell?
nothing to lose.
I mean, you have some things to lose, but let's actually look at what they are versus what we imagine them to be.
That's fair enough. Don't bet the entire life savings on a horse. How's that? Don't do that. So
unless it's the right horse, but
if the horse tells you it's going to win, then maybe do it, I guess.
Then maybe, that's Mr. Ed. But yeah, if you watched the Kentucky Derby last year, you got to be really careful about what you put your money on, because that went sideways fast.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a sure thing. I learned that from The Odd Couple. So
hey, The Odd Couple had a lot of really, really good advice.
They did. It was the sage writing of The Odd Couple. It was the horse racing episode. There's no such thing as a sure thing.
No such thing as a sure thing. Anyway, there you go.
This is always so much fun. With that, we should probably wrap it up with The Odd Couple. Anyway, thank you so much. Where can people find you?
DrBridgetCooper.com, or you can find me on Instagram or Facebook. Also, Bridget Cooper, Dr. Bridget Cooper.
Very good. If you're watching this, I can't even tell you where to go. Go to theanxioustruth.com and you will find this episode somewhere, depending on what number it turns into. And I'll make sure I link Dr. B's stuff in the show notes. So there you go. We'll do it again soon.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Okay, we are back in the studio. The studio. Anyway, that conversation was a whole lot of fun to have with Dr. B. Thank you, Bridget, for coming on and spending the time and taking the time to have the conversation with me. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. You got something out of it. I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned here and really more closely examining like the way we approach this problem and these disorders that we talk about in our roles as men and women. There's a lot of things we can improve on for sure. So if you guys want to find more about Dr. B, you can go to drbridgetcooper.com or find her on just about any social media platform at Dr. Bridget Cooper. And you can find the full show notes and links that you can follow over to Dr. B on my website. This episode would be theanxioustruth.com/138. I am going to play you out with Afterglow by my buddy Ben Drake. You can find Ben at facebook.com/Ben Drake Music if you like the song. Thanks, Ben, for letting me use it. Thanks for coming by, guys. We will see you next week in the next podcast episode. Keep moving forward. You know what you got to do. Go do it.
And this is where your story begins. You got the feeling that you're gonna win. Yeah, you're on your way. It's in the